Pedro and Fernanda's relationship had remained tender and respectful, a slow-burning connection that was far deeper than just physical attraction. Despite their closeness, they had not yet been intimate, valuing the simplicity of their bond and the quiet joy of just being together. On Sunday evening, as Fernanda finished her shift at 6 o'clock, she found a message waiting on her phone from Pedro. "Hi, love. I was thinking it might be better if we left for the farm tonight. That way, we'll wake up there tomorrow and won't waste time driving. What do you think?" Fernanda's heart fluttered as she quickly typed her response. "I'd love that, but I need to grab some clothes from home." Pedro's reply was swift. "No problem. I already packed mine. I'll be waiting for you in the usual spot. Are you leaving now?" "Yes, see you soon." As Fernanda made her way to Pedro's car, Marcia sat in her own vehicle, parked nearby, observing with keen interest. She had been watching Pedro for some time, suspicious of his lingering presence. When she spotted Fernanda walking toward his car, her suspicions crystallized. Her eyes narrowed as she watched Fernanda slide into the passenger seat and lean in to kiss Pedro on the lips. Marcia's voice was sharp as she muttered to herself, "I knew it. I was sure something was going on between them." Pedro started the car and pulled away, completely unaware that Marcia was following him. She tailed them for a short while, but when Pedro merged onto the highway, she decided to turn back. Her expression was one of calculation as she gripped the steering wheel, already formulating a plan. The next morning, Marcia arranged a meeting with a photographer, instructing him to meet her at the Royal Hotel. She was eager, her anticipation barely concealed as she laid out her scheme. She gave him detailed instructions, her every word dripping with malice. Meanwhile, Pedro and Fernanda spent the evening at the farm. The serene surroundings and their shared time together deepened their bond even further. Despite their closeness, Pedro maintained his respectful distance, something that left Fernanda increasingly enchanted by him. His patience and care made her fall even more deeply in love, to the point where she couldn't imagine her life without him. Tuesday arrived, and as planned, Fernanda called in sick, taking a well-deserved day to enjoy the tranquility of the farm. Pedro also stayed away from the Royal Hotel, savoring their quiet retreat together. It had been nearly a year since their relationship began, and each passing day only strengthened the love and trust they shared. Unbeknownst to them, Marcia's scheme was already in motion, her ambitions threatening to disrupt the happiness they had so carefully built. Marcia strode into Pedro's office, irritation flashing across her face. She glanced at his empty desk, then turned to his secretary. "Where is Pedro?" "He hasn't come to work today," the secretary replied politely. Suppressing her rising frustration, Marcia turned on her heel and made her way to the VIP restaurant. Upon arrival, she sought out the manager and demanded to know Fernanda's whereabouts. "She hasn't come in either," the manager informed her. "She called in sick." Marcia's lips curved into a smirk, her suspicions seemingly confirmed. She left without another word, her mind already working on her next move. Back at her office, Marcia accessed the employees' records and retrieved both Fernanda's home address and Pedro's new address. She handed the details to the photographer she had hired, her instructions clear and deliberate. Selena, unaware of Marcia's scheming, remained occupied with the business of the Royal Hotel. Marcia chose to keep her mother in the dark for now, determined to gather enough ammunition before revealing Pedro's relationship with Fernanda. She was convinced that Selena would disapprove. After all, Selena shared her father's strict adherence to propriety and status, striving to maintain his legacy both in design and ideology. Meanwhile, Pedro and Fernanda were enjoying their time at Leonardo's farm. The rustic beauty of the sprawling cocoa fields and serene landscapes gave them a much-needed escape from the pressures of their lives. Each night, they slept in separate rooms, respecting the boundaries of their relationship. On the second evening, Leonardo pulled Pedro aside, his tone gentle but curious. "Pedro, you don't need to sleep in separate rooms on my account. These days, no one thinks twice about such things." Pedro smiled, shaking his head. "It's not about you, Dad. Fernanda and we haven't taken that step yet." Leonardo's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise, but he nodded approvingly, a small smile playing on his lips. "That's rare these days, but admirable. It's clear you truly care for her." On Tuesday afternoon, as they drove back home, Pedro glanced at Fernanda, his voice thoughtful. "I think it's time for me to meet your parents. Don't you agree? Have you told them about me?" Fernanda nodded. "Yes, they know about you. They also know I'm here with you." Pedro's expression softened. "When can I meet them?" "I'll call my mom now and see if she's home," Fernanda replied, pulling out her phone. "If she's free, we can go over today." Pedro smiled. "Perfect. I'm looking forward to meeting them." As Fernanda dialed her mother's number, Pedro felt a calm anticipation settle over him. Despite the storm brewing back at the Royal Hotel, this moment felt like a step toward something meaningful, something real. After a long drive, Pedro and Fernanda arrived at her family home. Her parents were waiting at the door, their expressions a mix of curiosity and warmth. Pedro greeted them with his signature charm, putting everyone at ease almost instantly. They settled in the cozy living room, where Fernanda's mother had prepared a tray of snacks. The conversation flowed easily, with Pedro sharing stories about his life and listening intently to her parents' anecdotes. After a pleasant evening, Pedro left, promising to visit again soon. The next morning, Fernanda arrived at the Royal Hotel for her shift. Everything seemed normal. She moved through her tasks with her usual grace, unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. When her shift ended, Pedro was waiting for her at their usual meeting spot. But so was the photographer Marcia had hired, lurking discreetly nearby. The photographer snapped pictures of Fernanda walking toward Pedro's car, capturing the moment she leaned in to kiss him. He followed them to the restaurant, taking more photos of them entering together and later of Pedro dropping Fernanda off at her home. The following day, the photographer met Marcia in a secluded location to hand over the photos and collect his payment. "You did an excellent job," Marcia said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I need you to be very discreet about this assignment." "Don't worry," the man replied with a smirk. "I never reveal my clients. If you need anything else, you know where to find me." Marcia nodded curtly, ending the conversation. She wasted no time. Armed with the incriminating images, she contacted a journalist friend with a knack for scandalous stories. Marcia's instructions were clear and deliberate. "I need these photos published with a title that grabs attention," she said. "Make it juicy." The headline read, "Son of millionaire Selena Scott, heiress of the Royal Hotel, gets involved with a waitress from the hotel's VIP restaurant. Is she the first? Or are there others waiting to surface?" Below the headline was a photograph of Pedro and Fernanda sharing a kiss. The accompanying captions were cruel and sensationalized. One of them read, "Cinderella should be careful, midnight is coming." Another, beneath the kiss photo, sneered, "Does she think this will lead her to the altar? Or just out of poverty?" Marcia sat in her office, scrolling through the gossip site, her laughter echoing in the room. She reveled in her triumph, delighted by the disparaging headlines she had orchestrated. Meanwhile, Fernanda had no idea her private life had been turned into a public spectacle. She went about her day as usual, until a message from a close friend lit up her phone. "Friend, you need to check the gossip site immediately. Your photos are everywhere." Fernanda's heart sank. During her break, she headed to the employee recreation area, a quiet space where staff gathered to relax. She opened her phone, intending to message Pedro, but the sight of her friend's message stopped her cold. With trembling hands, she opened the link to the gossip site. Her breath hitched as the photos and cruel captions unfolded before her eyes. Fernanda scrolled through the gossip site, her heart sinking with every word. The cruel captions and invasive photos were more than she could handle. Her chest tightened, her thoughts racing. Without hesitating, she decided to confront Pedro. She stormed into his office, her expression a mix of hurt and distress. Pedro looked up from his desk, immediately concerned. "Fernanda, what's wrong? You're pale." Without a word, she handed him her phone, the gossip site open on the screen. Pedro took the phone, his brow furrowing as he read. His face darkened with anger as he absorbed the vicious headlines and invasive photos. Slamming the phone down on his desk, he stood, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I can't believe the nonsense I'm reading. Fernanda, listen to me. I don't care about any of this. None of it matters. I love you, and you know that. Tears welled in Fernanda's eyes, but she held them back. I'm not worried about me, Pedro. I'm worried about you. How will your mother react to this? Pedro stepped closer, his voice softening. You don't need to worry about me, my love. I'm not a child. I'll handle her. Trust me. Fernanda nodded reluctantly and returned to work, but the atmosphere had changed. Her co-workers whispered behind her back, their murmurs halting abruptly whenever she walked into the room. The warmth she had once felt in the workplace was gone, replaced by a stifling sense of isolation. Meanwhile, at home, Selena received a call from a close friend. Selena, have you seen what's circulating on the gossip site? It's about Pedro. Selena's stomach dropped. She quickly opened her laptop and found the articles. The headlines, the photos, the insinuations, it was all too much. Rage surged through her. She grabbed her coat and left immediately, heading straight for the Royal Hotel. Selena barged into Pedro's office, her face a mask of fury. Pedro, what is this nonsense I'm reading on the gossip site? I demand an explanation right now. Pedro leaned back in his chair, unfazed. Good morning to you too, Mom. What you're reading isn't a story, it's the truth. Fernanda and I are in love. Selena scoffed, crossing her arms. Are you insane? Don't be so naive. Can't you see that this girl is using you to elevate her position in life? You were the quickest and easiest way for her to secure her future. Pedro's composure cracked, his voice rising. Is that really what you think of me? That I'm so unlovable, no one could genuinely care for me? My father abandoned me, and to this day, no one, not even you, has told me why. And now, you're telling me Fernanda only sees me as a means to an end. Do you even know what love is, Mother? Because Fernanda does. She loves me for who I am, not for what I have. Selena stared at her son, speechless for a moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the office. As she exited, Marcia appeared in the hallway, her expression smug. What are you doing here, Mom? Marcia asked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. Selena glanced at her daughter, her face unreadable. We'll talk later, she said curtly before leaving. Back in his office, Pedro sent a message to Fernanda. I'll be waiting for you at the usual spot after work. With a determined air, Pedro left the hotel and headed straight to the Piaget store. He spent time carefully choosing a ring, selecting one that reflected the elegance and warmth of the woman he loved. As he left the store with the engagement ring in hand, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the chaos swirling around them, he knew one thing for certain: he wanted Fernanda by his side forever. When Fernanda finished her shift at the Royal Hotel, she went straight to the parking lot where Pedro was waiting for her. She slid into the car, her face clouded with frustration and sadness. Pedro immediately pulled her into a gentle embrace, his voice calm and reassuring. Trust me, he said softly. Please. I do trust you, Pedro, Fernanda replied, her voice trembling. But trusting you doesn't erase the lies they've published. Everyone at work is whispering behind my back. I feel their judgment every time I walk into a room. I don't think I can keep working at the hotel. It's unbearable. Pedro held her closer, his tone steady and full of concern. What are you saying? Do you want to leave the Royal Hotel? Fernanda hesitated before speaking. I had an idea a while ago when your sister fired me. I thought about doing something different with my life. Maybe the time has come to move forward with those plans. Pedro's expression softened, his curiosity piqued. May I know what these plans are? I hope I'm included in them. Fernanda smiled faintly, touched by his concern. Of course, you're part of my plans. Nothing has changed how I feel about you. I've been hurt by what's happening, but I'd only leave your life if you wanted me to. Pedro cupped her face gently, his gaze full of resolve. Then you'll never leave, because I'll never let you. Let's forget all of this for now. How about dinner at the restaurant where we went on our first date? Fernanda's smile brightened, her spirits lifting. That sounds wonderful. Pedro returned her smile, leaned in to kiss her tenderly, and started the car. When they arrived at the intimate restaurant, Pedro ordered a bottle of champagne. As the waiter poured their glasses, Pedro's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more serious yet filled with anticipation. He stood from his chair, reached into the pocket of his tailored suit, and pulled out a small velvet box. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee. The room seemed to hush as he opened the box, revealing a stunning engagement ring. "Fernanda," Pedro began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you are the light in my life, the person who has made me believe in love again. Will you marry me?" Fernanda's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. She was overwhelmed, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Yes, Pedro. 1,000 times yes." The entire restaurant erupted into applause as Pedro stood, slipping the ring onto Fernanda's trembling finger. He pulled her close, their kiss tender and full of promise. They toasted their engagement with champagne, the sparkle of the ring on Fernanda's finger catching the soft light of the restaurant. Dinner felt like a celebration of their future, filled with warmth and joy. Afterward, Pedro drove Fernanda home, his heart brimming with happiness. When they arrived at Fernanda's house, Pedro insisted on going inside to speak with her parents about their engagement. Her parents greeted the news with joy, their happiness evident, though their concern about the gossip site lingered. "We're so happy for you both," Fernanda's father said, his tone measured. "But Pedro, are you sure about this? The things being said online." Pedro interrupted gently but firmly. "None of that matters. What truly matters is how we feel about each other. Unfortunately, this kind of gossip happens because of my family's wealth and public image. People love to stir controversy where there is none. But I don't care about any of that. My priority is Fernanda and the life we're building together." Fernanda's mother nodded, her worry softening into a smile. "That's all we wanted to hear. You're a good man, Pedro." Pedro took Fernanda's hand and looked at her parents with sincerity. "I will do everything in my power to make her happy. That's all I've ever wanted." As Pedro left that night, he felt an unshakable sense of certainty. Despite the challenges ahead, their love was unyielding, a truth stronger than any headline. Pedro bid a polite farewell to Fernanda's parents, his tone steady and reassuring. "Please don't let this type of gossip affect you or Fernanda. It's baseless, and it will fade just as quickly as it appeared." Fernanda walked Pedro to his car, her hand lingering in his as they reached the vehicle. They paused, their eyes locking in a silent exchange of affection and understanding. "Forget about everything they've written," Pedro said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not worth your energy or your tears. None of it defines us." Fernanda nodded, her resolve strengthened by his words. "I'll try." Pedro leaned in, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "I'll call you later. Have a good night, love." At Selena's house, unease hung in the air. She paced the room, her thoughts tangled with frustration. Marcia entered, her face painted with feigned concern. "How are you, mother? Have you seen the gossip site? What do you plan to do about it?" Selena's voice was clipped, her agitation barely contained. "I'm still thinking." Marcia's eyes gleamed, her own plan simmering beneath her calm exterior. The next morning, Fernanda arrived at the Royal Hotel, determined to keep her head high despite the whispers and stares. As she stepped into the locker room to prepare for her shift, Marcia was already waiting for her, leaning casually against the lockers with a smirk that dripped malice. "Good morning, gold digger," Marcia began, her voice cutting. "You've been unlucky, haven't you? Your little plan won't work after all." Fernanda froze, her hand tightening on her bag as Marcia continued, her words venomous. "I always knew there was something going on between you and my idiot brother. He deserves someone like you, a lowly underling. From the beginning, I suspected it. That fool was born to be poor, which is why he gravitated toward someone on his level." Marcia's words turned colder, her tone sharp and calculated. "Little does he know, you don't even like him. All you want is what he can give you. Not even his father wanted him, and you're just the next opportunist who's taken pity on him. Pedro is a pathetic, problematic man, incapable of attracting anyone better than you. And you saw that quickly and latched on." Fernanda stood frozen, anger and hurt coursing through her veins, but she refused to give Marcia the satisfaction of seeing her break. Fernanda had spent a sleepless night, her mind consumed by the events of the day before. She felt drained but determined as she prepared for work, bracing herself for what the day might bring. When she arrived at the Royal Hotel, she was met by Marcia in the locker room, her venomous words sharper than ever. Fernanda stood silently, enduring every insult. Marcia poured out her disdain, calling her a gold digger, a poor opportunist, and an underling who had latched onto Pedro out of desperation. Fernanda absorbed it all without reaction, her silence only fueling Marcia's arrogance. When Marcia finally left, satisfied with her tirade, Fernanda took a deep breath, holding back the storm of emotions within her. Meanwhile, Selena waited in Marcia's office, her face impassive but her mind racing. When Marcia finally arrived, Selena greeted her with cool formality. "Good morning, Marcia. Have you been busy?" "Good morning, Mom. Have you been waiting long?" "No, only a few minutes. I need to speak with Fernanda." Marcia's eyebrows rose slightly, her curiosity piqued. "Would you like me to take you to her?" "That won't be necessary. I know where she is," Selena replied, rising from her chair. Without another word, she left the office and headed to the VIP restaurant. When Selena arrived, she saw Fernanda arranging the tables with her usual meticulous care. "Good morning, Fernanda," Selena said evenly. "I'd like to have a word with you." Fernanda turned, startled but composed. "Good morning, Would you like to speak here?" "No, in my office. Please follow me." Once in the office, Selena gestured for Fernanda to sit. Her tone was measured, almost too calm. "Fernanda, as you know, the photos of you and Pedro have been seen by everyone. Your relationship is now public knowledge. I want to make it clear that I have nothing against you personally, but I do not believe you are the right person for my son." Fernanda's expression didn't falter, though, her eyes sharpened. May I say something before you continue?" "Of course," Selena said, tilting her head slightly. "If you plan to insult me, please don't. Your daughter Marcia already handled that this morning. She waited for me in the locker room to deliver every insult she could think of, calling me a gold digger, poor, an underling, and many other things. I already know what you and your family think of me." Selena was visibly taken aback, her usual composure faltering for a moment. She quickly recovered and continued. "Fernanda, I'm not here to insult you. That's not my intention. I am here to offer you a significant sum of money to leave Pedro's life. I hope you can understand that this is for his benefit. Pedro is at the start of a promising career, and is doing remarkably well. He is not ready for the weight of a serious relationship. With the money I'm offering, you'll be able to secure your future." Selena leaned forward slightly, her tone softening as if she believed she was being reasonable. "Pedro is affectionate and kind, and I understand why you like him. But if you truly care for him, you'll let him go." Fernanda's chest tightened as she processed Selena's words. Her voice was steady but tinged with disbelief. You said you weren't here to insult me, but you've just insulted me more deeply than Marcia ever could. Please call HR. I don't want to work here anymore. I'll go get my bag." Selena stood, her voice rising slightly. "Fernanda, wait. I'm not finished." Fernanda, already walking toward the door, paused and turned. "But I am," she said firmly before leaving. Fernanda marched straight to HR, her resolve unshaken. The staff member greeted her with a polite smile, but her demeanor shifted when Fernanda declared, "I don't want to work here anymore."